We are challenging people to reevaluate their philosophical, psychological, sociological, and theological belief system.
So before we get started, let's recap. Lou Elizondo was a high-up CIA officer. He was in the military and he fell back into civilian mode, civilian territory, to talk about something the government that didn't want released, which was the UAP phenomenon that they have, and they have slowly been declassifying. They can't figure out what this is, and it's been happening since the early 1900s, according to facts. Right now, this stuff has been come out through WikiLeaks. It has come out through many different military officers, but specifically Lou Elizondo is kind of leading the way with a team of people trying to push this forward. And it has a spiritual agenda to it that isn't physical. And that's what's the most scary to me. And that's why I created this channel. So today we're going to hear a little bit of that backstory and kind of add to the dialogue that's been going on, because we want to continue this dialogue to understand what is really happening here and how it doesn't affect your religion at all. Watch this.
I think it was 2 years ago, you wrote the article on Medium about your predecessor, who at the time you couldn't name. It was James Lukatsky, and how his career was ruined by certain people who had an ideology and people who think this is demonic. Now, somebody told me recently, they said those same folks are higher up in the Air Force. It's not mentioned, you guys don't mention it all, but are those folks really the ones who are holding this back? Are they? And I know it's not the whole Air Force, but there's certain people.
And it's not just the Air Force. Look, Jim Lukatsky asked me to make him a promise early on, and that when I came out, I would protect him, and I did. And that's why early on, I never mentioned his name until he came out and mentioned his name. I respected that tremendously. And by the way, they were gunning for him. I mean, this is a guy they were really coming after. And so we really had to circle the wagons around him the best that we could.
Who's they? Who's coming after him?
I'm not going to share names right now. Those individuals are still part of the system. Some of them are out. I suspect they still have a lot of influence, very, very senior members of the U.S. government. Fortunately, we had some friends that we could call as well and provide counterfire, I guess, in lay terms. But yeah, they have, they have.
Those are the folks who think this is demonic, those folks?
Some of them did, yeah, and they had a lot of rank and a lot of influence, and they had been around the system for a very long time. One of them was actually a mentor of mine, and it was it was really, really sad to see, because this person was normally an incredible intelligence officer. I mean, really did some great stuff for our country, but had this this thing about him where, if it had anything to do with that conflicted with the theological belief system, it was considered demonic. It was considered anti-Christian, and I disagree with that. I mean, I'm a very spiritual person. I don't wear my religion on my sleeve, but I believe in a lot of the same things and principles that he believed in. But I also believe that knowledge and information is important to our species. Otherwise, we don't grow. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good or how bad the news is. We need to know what it is. And that's where I differed with some of these folks who are part of this little religious cabal that exists.
So this opens up a really interesting discussion, because number one, he's right. We need to know what it is. We can't just be like the people back in Galileo's day, where they wouldn't look through the telescope to find out that the rest of the universe didn't revolve around the Earth. But on the other hand, we're not dealing with physical objects. The potential, and what I would tell him is, Lou, if you're watching this, I don't disagree with you, but what if we're dealing with entities that can lie, that are not always telling the truth? What if they have another agenda? And that's where the danger comes in, because I think I have proof that proves that. If you would watch Starfall, I think I could prove that to you. In fact, I'm beginning phase 2 of Starfall, which we will discuss more of what's actually happening through the lens of the Bible, and finding out that this deception that will come upon the earth is not the last straw. It is not the final deception. It is only a precursor to what is coming out. Now, I don't know how much Lou knew about this. I know he knows a lot about this, but what's interesting to me is that some stuff has come out that I think Lou knows about. They've had pilots die. They've had terrible things happen to ships. They've had awful things happen after they go after these things. And although it's necessary to know what these things are, they're more advanced than us, and they are trying to communicate with us. In Galileo's day, we're dealing with planets. We're dealing with physical objects that don't have a human side to them. They don't have a psychology. But the way his argument differs is that we're dealing with entities that could be very dangerous. And so we have to be very careful about how we approach this. And I think he understands that, because he does take an approach, if you listen to some of his other stuff, that says, hey, you know what, these things are not benevolent. We just don't know, but we have to figure it out. The problem comes in when you might open the door to potential dangers that happen when you start to communicate with these things. And what blows my mind is they know this. They know this, or at least maybe he doesn't want to admit it. I don't know. This is fascinating to me. Check this out.
I want to see videos, but there's so much stuff still I need to learn that I don't worry about that, because I'm so behind trying to keep up with your interviews and just learning more stuff. I mean, I just got into the poltergeist side. Like, I didn't even know there was a connection until Eric Davis talked about it 2 years ago. He said there's a connection between UFOs and poltergeist. So there's so much more to learn. But like, yeah, 5 years, I'm fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're getting there now, right? You now have biological effects listed as part of the law. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a huge step forward.
I never expected that. I mean, I didn't expect Senator Gillibrand came out of nowhere. I had no idea. I was like, who? She's talking about this now? So that was just a really great.
So what is a poltergeist? Google defines poltergeist as, from the Oxford Dictionary, as a ghost or other supernatural being supposedly responsible for physical disturbances such as loud noises and objects thrown around. I would go a little step further and even say that it's responsible for dangerous scenarios too. And so that's what Lou is kind of talking about. He's kind of saying, hey, look, not only is it connected to poltergeist, but it's also connected to physical harm. And so this physical harm has been put into the United States law that says, hey, if we encounter this type of entity or this type of strange anomaly, they call them UAPs, then we have to report it, even if it's harming people. And in the past, this has been so taboo that the military just goes, yeah, we've had a drone accident, and we don't know exactly what happened, but maybe it was friendly fire. They've been killed in war. You don't want to actually ruin your reputation by saying you saw a UFO. And so that's why this whole new definition has come about. And now we're in today's generation where people are more accepting of this, and they don't care what is actually happening. They just want to come to the truth of it, regardless of what happens. And that's where the danger comes in, because if you find out what it is, maybe you're going to want to communicate with it too, if it is more advanced than you are. But how do you know it has the best intention in mind? How do you know it's not there to eat you? But in a Christian realm, how do you know it's not there to deceive you?
But this generation doesn't care about stigma and taboo. They just want to get to the truth of things. And this generation is hungry for facts. And they're a lot more accepting of the fact that our species, in the final analysis, may not necessarily be the only life form in the universe.
Wow. So going back to when you were asked to be part of ATIP, were there conversations that prepared you for the reality shock that you were about to face?
There were no questions that prepared me for what I was about to get into. People often say, "Oh, it must have been fun and must have been exciting." No, it was pretty sobering. I liken this conversation to like having a conversation with a loved one about maybe cancer. Now, the good news is the diagnosis looks fine. You're going to recover, but it's a serious conversation. This is something that we are challenging people to reevaluate their philosophical, psychological, sociological, and theological belief system.
Wow.
Now, anytime you ask humanity to do something like that, it usually takes generations. You can't just pivot. because, for example, let's just take culture, for example, of a country. It's like an aircraft carrier. How long does it take to turn an aircraft carrier? Well, it takes quite a bit of time and a lot of effort and whatnot. Well, this topic is the same way, because we're challenging people to reconsider, if you will, reevaluate their understanding of what they've been told about the universe, and more importantly, our place in it.
Okay, so what Lou is saying here is that we want to challenge what you think about the Bible. We want to challenge everything you understand about life. And there's actually been, in Starfall, there was a quote by someone that says, the Vatican is telling us that we're going to have to reread the Bible once we understand this UAP concept. And Lou has been to the Vatican. There's another video I have on the channel that talks about that, where he talks and realizes that, yes, these things, according to the Vatican archives, have been around for a long, long time. And the weird thing is that most of these guys, the whole team of people, as you can see on this channel, they believe that these things have been around a long time. They don't believe that it could be from far distant galaxies, far away, primarily because it's so far physically to travel that far. You would need some other form of wormhole or some kind of thing to get here, and no one has discovered that yet. So they're trying to take this fact by fact base. But when you try to approach something with the scientific method that really needs the psychological method, because we're dealing with other entities, that's where you run into problems, because entities can change the variables in the scientific method. In the scientific method, you want the controlled environment to test your hypothesis, but you can't do that if the psychological factor is inside the scientific method, because that can just change everything. So therein lies the danger. So in this next clip, Lou talks about how a lot of UFOlogy tries to take the psychological method of what they've received, what they've downloaded from their dreams and visions about these things. These entities, these fallen angels, have given people these ideas that we are from the Pleiades, or we are this long ago race that has trying to make you evolve. This idea, he says, you can't base that on facts. And so we have to go through specifically a scientific method on this. But how can you go into the scientific method on this if also and say, hey, I want you to reevaluate your theology based on the facts we see, when the facts can be changed by the entities that are deceiving you?
And people talking about, whatever, it's people from Alpha Proxima, Alpha Centauri, or the Pleiades, and I know this because I had a download. Well, that's great, but that doesn't help us much, because there's no way to measure that. There's no way to prove that. It's fairly subjective, So we have to approach this very scientifically. And I'm not saying their opinions aren't valid, but at the end of the day, they're just opinions. Stop stating them as fact. That's why I don't give my opinion. People ask, Lou, what do you think? You know what? It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the facts suggest and what the data suggests, because I am not going to make that same mistake as everybody else. It's just, we have to exercise some sort of self-restraint. We've got to be willing to approach this scientifically, just like Galileo when he was proposing that the Earth was not the center of the galaxy, right? And there are people that even refuse to look through his telescope. And they could have seen the truth right there, but they didn't. And I think to some degree we're in the same situation now. I know everybody wants answers, and in the absence of answers, we tend to fill in the blanks with what we think. But sometimes what we think isn't necessarily what we know, and we have to remember that there's a difference between a personal truth and a universal truth. A personal truth is something like religion or political affiliation or something like that, where a universal truth is like gravity.
Whoa. Okay. I liked what he said up until that point. Personal truths are not religion. Religion comes in, it's a hard fact. There is truth and there's error. And that's where we're divided on this. Personal truth, yeah, gravity is a physical truth. It is something that doesn't change. But personal truth, it's not relative, and that's where a lot of this is going. Hey, relative truth is incorrect, and that is what mainly Hollywood is pushing. That's what you've seen in The Matrix. That's what you've seen in all these shows that say, hey, you know what? We don't have to obey the rules. Your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and that's what is infecting our culture right now. These are the issues that the government is facing. These are the things that the internal government is talking about right now that you are hearing about. And this is the conversation that's happening, and it's all being twisted by Hollywood. Primarily. I mean, you got Hollywood, you got media, you got all these channels that are trying to focus people's attention on specific things. And that's where this is going. And that's how this is happening. These ideas stick in each one of our heads, and then people say, well, you know, it has to be your truth and my truth. It's not your truth. It's not my truth. There's truth, there's error, that's it.
You know, personal truth is something like religion or political affiliation or you know, something like that, where a universal truth is like gravity, right? We're all subject to that. And we have to be able to reconcile the two. And we don't, because there's a lot of emotion in this topic. And I understand that. I appreciate that. Believe me, I gave up my career because of it. So I get the emotion. But we have to resist the urge of going down that rabbit hole and saying, yes, this is a way to do it. And this is absolutely the answer, because we don't know yet. You know, and what happens is that people will seize upon that, and they'll take advantage of people, and they, you know, charge people an exuberant amount of money to go on a UFO expedition, when in reality, there's nothing there. You know, I can't tell how many shows that you'll watch and they say, oh, a portal opened up. What the hell does that even mean? What? What portal? What? Where are you even getting that? What does that mean? What scientific evidence are you suggesting that? Because you see something in the sky and all of a sudden now you're taking a leap that there's some sort of portal to where? Another dimension, another time, another space? What physics are involved? What are you talking about? What do you even know what a portal looks like? You know, is even there such a thing as a portal? So these are the things that you know, I'm just harping on one, you know, little example, but we got to avoid that. We have to avoid that. That's why when we were doing our show with Unidentified, you know, we didn't provide answers deliberately, because we made a decision. We were not going to provide any type of speculative answers. Here's the facts. Here's what the witnesses are saying. You figure it out, because we don't know yet, you know, and we're trying to solve this mystery together. So anyways, a bit of a long-winded. I know I tend to get a bit emotional about it, but you know, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating to see how people have managed to try to hijack this narrative and twist it and contort it. And, you know, they wonder why nobody pays attention. Well, you know, look in the mirror, because you guys are acting nutty. Stop doing that. Resist the urge to always have your answer and your narrative be the one. Let science do its job.
Let science do its job. Well, I hope science does its job, but I hope they take into consideration that they are dealing with things that they don't understand. They're dealing with things that they can't put into a paradigm that can control the environment that they're in. That they're dealing with things that are much smarter than they are, that will ultimately lead to many people being lost in the end. And that's what the Bible has always warned about. That's what Revelation talks about. And you know what? In Starfall 2, which I don't know what I'm naming it yet, but in the second version of Starfall coming out soon, we will be talking about that final deception. That is post this giant alien deception that has happened. If you haven't seen Starfall yet, go to youtube.com. My channel is Strange Normal. You can find it. It's on the main channel. It's called Starfall. That will explain everything that's going on in society right now. It's incredible. It's updated, and it's there for your benefit. Share it, like it, subscribe, and I will see you next time, because we got a lot more coming up.